There you go. So good morning and welcome to our social and up close network lounge presentations. We are always grateful to our speakers that kindly give their time to us to present their talent and professional expertise. Ophelia will be introduced more formally in a few moments. We are also very appreciative of the many registrants that have joined us on a regular basis over the many months that just passed. And always we welcome our new first-time guests. We are delighted to say we have a guest coming on board from the UK this morning. I'm just watching for that. And so we're delighted that we've had some guests from the UK over the last 16 months, which is kind of interesting. So just some housekeeping notes. Please do keep your mics on mute. Any comments or questions in the chat, use that. And it's always nice to know what business sectors are joining us today. If you wish to join that, put that in the chat room, that'd be great. If you wish to share that, I should say. And after the presentation by Ophelia, we will do our best to answer any questions in the chat. So as Josie's having a challenge getting online, I am going to continue with the bio that I have here. Hopefully it's the right one. Ophelia is an ordained metaphysical minister, certified grief counselor, life coach, and energy practitioner. She holds a bachelor degree in sociology and metaphysics. In 2004, she successfully launched an online intuitive consulting business and conducted over 4,500 sessions with clients around the globe. In 2009, following the death of her beloved mother and best friend, she realized her healing journey was not complete. Through divine inner guidance and insights from angels and guides, she overcame grief, completed her spiritual healing, and came to a point of self-acceptance. Ophelia's mission is to help and inspire others to find their way out of the dark and into the light. Her trademark message is love will lead you home. I hope that's the correct one. This is the one I had, Ophelia, but by all means, do engage. And thank you for joining us this morning, and the show is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here and to see some familiar faces that I haven't seen in a long time. It's wonderful. Thank goodness for Zoom and this way of connecting to people. So what a year we've had. And today I am going to be talking about, I'm just going to share my screen one moment.
Oh, just one moment here. Let me just do that quickly. There you go.
Okay. Just 1 second. Let me get back to the Zoom.
Should be working. Hopefully you've worked before.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Okay, awesome. I always have to keep my fingers crossed that this happens. So today we're talking about why having everything is never enough. So what is everything? We talk about this a lot. You know, I remember thinking everything as a 6-year-old was having all the toys in the world. I thought at 10, it was playing with my friends, and my mom wouldn't come and embarrass me and take me out of the park. As I got older, everything became something more. And as women, as men, we are taught sometimes that everything is having a great family, having a good life, having a good career, enjoying what you do, having work-life balance, having all those things. And none of those things are wrong in and of themselves. But sometimes having it all, having everything that we desire, is not enough. And this lesson had become highlighted during the pandemic, where I found out, and I'm going to share a little bit of my personal story, where I learned prior to the pandemic, about 12, 13 years ago, when I discovered I thought I had everything. I was married. My ex-husband and I were making a 6-figure income. I was getting along with his kids. They were starting to call me mom. Life was great. It was sort of like the Brady Bunch family. We were doing well. But you know, when you watch those biography shows and they go behind the scenes of a sitcom and they realize that there was drama, well, that was my life. I didn't think that I was my life was going to fall apart. But my life was falling apart. The divorce was a disaster. It was horrific. There was infidelity. Then there was financial challenge. It took me 4 years to get a divorce that I didn't want, but there was delays. And then a year later, my mom died. I realized in those moments, those grief moments, those trying moments, that having everything, having the perfect house, having the family was not everything. And this understanding, this reality revisited me during the pandemic. Once again, I was faced with the idea that I thought I had it all. My life had rebounded from about 10 years ago when I went through something really tragic, where I started to rebuild, like many of us starts to rebuild. But I realized that when things were locked down and became a sandwich generation, caring for my niece, caring for my father, and realizing as we were all together 24 hours, 7 days a week, that the everything was too much. The everything was caring for a dad that was experiencing Alzheimer's that I didn't even realize. And then it was highlighted because I was with him 24 hours, 7 days a week. I love my niece, but being with a toddler 24 hours, 7 days a week was really trying. I am the type of parent where I love daycare. I love it. It's great, and she loves it. But what I learned was that my soul, my inner being was not happy. And it was a profound, profound reality that hit me again, that having the everything, having what we think is everything, is not enough until we are happy inside. When I have been doing these presentations, one of the things that I realize is that, and why I wanted to talk to you about this today, a lot of people have been feeling sometimes ashamed. And this is going through the pandemic. We are thinking, well, I have a house. I am lucky. I live in a country that has, whether you agree or not or disagree compared to some other countries, we're doing pretty okay. I'm able to stay at home. I'm able to stay safe. I'm able to be okay. But in that, I'm feeling so sad, and I'm feeling guilty for feeling sad. I'm feeling guilty maybe for my successes. In the quiet moments of the pandemic, what I've learned from myself and from others, that the material trappings, or even the trappings that's not so material, was coming up. Because when we are allowed to sit and be with ourselves, this is the things that come up. We feel ashamed sometimes of our successes. Old wounds come up that we haven't dealt with. We question the meaning of life. We desire more, but should we have more? Do we deserve to have more? Isn't this all enough when millions of people around the world are dying? Sometimes we feel guilty for wanting that more. And then we question that something is missing, and that something is missing because what this pandemic, the lesson that it has taught us, and I'm hoping, at least it's taught me and many people that I've talked to, is that we are looking for that missing quality. If you have ever had someone close to you die, a mother, a spouse, or even a child, you quickly realize that life is precious. We say that all the time, but now we know it with our heart and our minds. We know that life is short. Life is unpredictable. Life brings up our vulnerabilities. So what do? We appreciate it. So what I wanted to let you know, that there's nothing wrong for desiring something more. There's nothing wrong with wanting more abundance in your life, whether it's financial, you want a bigger house, but that in and of itself, what I have learned during this pandemic and talking to my clients is that's not all. There has been, going through the last couple of years, Grief brings us, when we're alone, has brought us to this point where we're feeling, and we were just talking about this before, there's this loss of connection. We miss going to those business meetings. But it's more than coming together. If we lived alone or if we lived with a partner, going to these connections, going to something, it's just for us. You're not bringing maybe your child, you're getting away from your parent, and it's not running away, because our soul needs to have something that's about us. That's the connection within a group of like-minded people that I have chosen to connect to. I feel accepted. Hopefully I feel accepted, but this is a choice. This is something that I have chosen. This is something that I've desired, and it's just for me. And this connection was rapidly taken away. We were able to connect the bonds again through technology, but there's nothing as having that physical contact. And this was proven to me when I was running grief groups. The grief groups were successful, but they were in person because my clients desired that physical kind of connection. When the pandemic hit, this loss of connection disappeared, and my clients didn't want to go virtually because they didn't feel the connection of the people. They wanted to look and physically have a hug with that individual. So that is something, when we desire something more and we don't have a connection, we realize the value of having a connection. The other thing that going through this pandemic that's taught me that having everything is not enough is that there was a sense of loss of rituals and routines. For me, it was going to yoga classes. It was going to my meditation classes. It was teaching, but it was having those rituals, the simple rituals, as going to your local coffee shop in the morning, sitting at your favorite table and having your tea or coffee. And for me, it was London fog, and I couldn't have that anymore. And it's not because I always drank the whole thing. It was just because it was a routine and a ritual. If you're a spiritual or faith-based person, going to church, going to your mosque, that was taken away. And we realized, oh my goodness, I took for granted these rituals that I don't have anymore. That is also another grief, when we don't have the opportunity to practice our rituals and routines. Now we appreciate them. Now we're saying, thank goodness I can get back to it. As we were talking before, a routine could be once a month you go to get a massage, or every 2 months you get a haircut. Those are routines that you appreciate it because it's an opportunity for you to provide self-care for yourself. But when we don't have it, we appreciate it even more. The other thing that having everything that has taught us is that business sometimes will never be the same. Our own business has shifted, it has changed, we've had to pivot, we've watched our friends and colleagues struggle, some businesses have closed, and we realized I had everything. I had a great business, but it wasn't enough. What do I do now? What do I do now that my business has maybe reduced, especially if we have retail stores? I'm seeing more and more retail businesses closing down, and some are not coming back. That's a loss. They thought they had everything, but realize that life is unpredictable. There are things that we cannot control. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. So we focus on having everything because it creates a scaffolding around our life. But when our life is shooken up and that everything is taken away, we're left with the grief. The other lesson that we found out about having everything, sometimes you don't even know what the everything is to know what the everything that you feel that you're missing or that you're lost. And this is called ambiguous grief. It's you feel that you're in limbo. And I want us to talk a little and land here a little bit longer to explain this feeling, because it's a feeling that many are feeling going through and coming out of this pandemic. It's a sense of, yes, I'm happy if you got vaccinated, I'm going back to work, but there's a hesitancy. Maybe it's not you, but there are people that are hesitant to going back to normal because maybe their normal wasn't so great, or they have great anxiety to going back out to the world. We were told for a year and a half to stay in, to physically separate, and for some people, that created another anxiety. Now we're saying it's okay to reconnect, it's okay to get together, here's some safety guidance, and we're feeling sad. And we're thinking to myself, why am I feeling sad when this should be a good thing? It's called ambiguous grief. It's a feeling of being in limbo. It's a feeling of almost being in something heavy and in a soup and you cannot name it. And at times, this is what we may be feeling as we went through and are coming out of the pandemic. Maybe you didn't have someone close to you die. You did not get the virus. You made it through. You were okay mentally. You had some down days, but generally you're fine and you feel grateful. But yet there's a sadness. And what we tend to do, we tend to say, oh, I'm okay. I shouldn't be feeling that. And I'm here to tell you, you should feel whatever you are intending to feel, because there's a difference from feeling blessed in having a home, blessed that you are able to feed yourself and your family and you're very comfortable. And it's also not but and. Two things can be true. And I'm feeling sad. And I'm missing my friends. I'm missing that loss of connection. This is ambiguous grief. And this is what I find when I'm doing the research. A lot of people in the middle of the road who are doing okay but are still feeling sad, this is what they're dealing with. They're dealing with a sense of feeling ambiguous because we've been living in limbo for a year and a half. We say we're opening, then we close back. We move forward 3 steps, we take 2 steps back. And we don't know. And this limbo is unpredictable. And now we seem to be going forward and we're wondering, is this going to stay good? Is this going to happen? This is ambiguous grief. And this is a feeling where none of us like, because we tend to want to be in control. I know I do. We tend to want to have as much control in life as we want, as we can. Helen Keller said, what we have once enjoyed deeply, we can never lose. All that we love deeply becomes a part of us. All I am talking about today, about having everything and why it's not enough and what we're feeling. And when you hear my story and what Gabby did in the introduction, she talked about my life. When we put it all together, why having everything is not enough is because every single person, and this is according to Ophelia, and according to a lot of studies, we realize, and especially when people have lost a loved one. I know for me, the death of my mother and the grief that I went through with my divorce, dealing with family members with mental health and addictions, having family that you thought you could trust that betrayed you, having to relearn who you can trust again, going through financial hardships, and just rebuilding your life. When you put it all together, it's a soul grief. Because I realize, and many people realize, that having everything, the things that we say are what we want out of life, having the perfect house, is nothing. I would give it all up to bring my mother back today. And what that is a soul grief. We are grieving in this big, wonderful, big world. The pandemic has taught us that having all the frills cannot keep us safe. The pandemic has killed people who are from the very rich to the very poor. And in between that line, the lesson that I hope that you take away from this year of experience is that your soul is what is grieving. The soul is what's the internal part of you. It's what brings you joy. And there's a difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is momentarily. So I want you to imagine this. It's your birthday. It's a milestone birthday. And you thought no one remembered. And now we can all get together. You walk into your home and they go, surprise! And you thought, oh my God, they love me. You have a wonderful birthday celebration. And then, people help you to clean up, but then you look on your beautiful white carpet, there's a red stain. There's a piece of cake on the floor. They cleaned up, but they didn't clean up the way that you cleaned up. And in that moment, the happiness may go away, but as you're cleaning up the wine, you remember why it's spilt. You remember it maybe a day or so when the stain is still there. You remember the cake that's still sticky on the counter. Maybe you missed a spot. That is joy. Joy is, I call it, it's the flat line. It moves like a slow wave during the course of our life. Joy is the connection to soul, to your soul. Grief is another word for love. And when we grieve anything, what it has impacted us so deep within our soul, it's because we have loved that person, place, or thing so deeply that now when that person, place, or thing is no longer in our physical presence, we are grieving. But we're not grieving, and the world tells us we'll get over it. But our soul says you're not going to get over it because it's love. So grief is about the emotional response to a loss, but it's also about understanding and transformation. Grief is in our life to transform you. Grief is in our life to help you to connect to that deep soul understanding that's called joy. Joy is what will sustain us through the things of life that's unpredictable. Sometimes we have more joy, and sometimes our joy has gone down a little depending on what's going on in our life. And what has sustained me through all of my life challenges was a mantra that came from my mom when I saw her as a child, and then as a teenager, and then as a woman, say to me and to her friends who were going through great tragedy, saying, don't let anyone steal your joy. That stuck in my head as I went through any forms of grief. Doesn't mean that I didn't feel, didn't mean that I wasn't angry, didn't mean that I wasn't upset or pissed off that I was experiencing it. But that little voice in my head made me realize, and as I got older, I started to better understand that what my mother was telling me is that don't let anything in your life steal your soul. Don't let anything, as much as the abundance that we have, the amount of money in your bank account. And I bet there's a lot of people, I know that the relationship that I thought I had with my family, I would trade it today to have it again. I would trade having my mom in my life again for all of the money in my bank account. And sometimes we have to have something tragic happen to realize that that's not important. Our soul is trying to tell us, and the lesson that I encourage you to learn, the legacy that you can give for all of the individuals around the world who's died, for all the people that have been impacted with COVID-19, to the healthcare workers, to all those essential workers, is for you to appreciate your life, to appreciate into your life where its life is precious, that my being is important, that nothing is more important than living my best life. When we are dealing with the soul grief, we go through stages, and understanding it, the first stage of understanding it is denial. We feel this and then we're in denial. Going through the pandemic, I was in denial. I thought, this is only going to be for 3 months. We're going to get over it. And then we realized when the school was closed for 4-5 months, the anger comes up. We go through that phases of anger. And then we think to ourselves, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be angry. We need to be angry. Anger is the fuel that helps us to get through a grief. For instance, when my mom died, I was angry. I didn't have the denial. I went right to anger because I was angry at how my family, my relatives responded to me, and they were not supportive. That anger fueled me for a good long time. But I needed that fuel because now I was caring for my 12-year-old sister. I was decluttering a house and selling a house for my dad, 70 years. My mom was 70, realizing how can someone have so much stuff? And I felt all the pressure on my shoulder. That anger helped to sustain me because I had to live. I still had to go to work. I still had to get my sister to school. I had a house to sell. I had stuff to do. So that anger was my scaffolding. It held me up. In our quiet moments, the depression hits, that deep sadness. And for me, it was at night when I was home. My mom was in Toronto. She died in Toronto. So I would go back and forth to Toronto after 6 months after my mom died to take care and manage her estate. When I got home in Kingston, at that time I was teaching at St. Lawrence College. I always remember when I came home, it was at night, when all my scaffolding fell down and I would cry. And I never knew I could cry this much. I always thought that people only cried like that when they're on the soap operas. But that was my depression. It was a sadness. And it would go back to anger and depression. And my denial wasn't the denial that my mother was dead, because grief brings up other grief. It was denial that, oh my goodness, my life has shifted. It's in shock. I can't do things like how my mother did it. And then it was the bargaining. Oh God, please make this better. You're bargaining with a higher power. Please take this weight and this sadness away. And none of these things happen in this circle, this neat circle. Grief is messy and it doesn't happen overnight, but these are the basic steps that Kubler-Ross talked about in the change when she studied in the 60s about individuals who were dealing with addictions. And this study really kind of helped us and at times harmed us when we think about grief, because some people think it happens step by step. It doesn't. It's messy. You can be in one phase for a day. You can never be in a phase. It can take you years to be, and some people can be in one for years. And there's no right or wrong about it. It's just how you are processing grief. The stage that Kubler-Ross talks about was acceptance. You've accepted, and you start to look for ways of bringing meaning into your life. Other psychologists talked about this and said that continued her work and started to talk about reconstruction and finding meaning. My reconstruction and what I started to do with my clients who wanted to do this, because being stuck in that heaviness, when we realized having everything wasn't enough, having a perfect career when your only child has died by suicide means your career means nothing. How do you reconstruct your life when this has happened to you? You find a way, and the meaning comes to you. The legacy can be, as many people has made that effort, it's a conscious choice. And for some people, especially for parents that I have worked with whose children have died, they come to a place where they say, I will never be joyful like I was before. And I say, that's okay. You create meaning, but I'm going to continue the legacy. Mothers Against Drunk Drivers started from this legacy. Mothers were tired of having their children being killed by a drunk driver. So they started Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Many organizations, like when I worked at March of Dimes, that started from the idea that we wanted to end polio. So they went to March for Dimes. So a lot of organizations start that way. They bring meaning. That doesn't mean they don't miss their child, their parent, their sibling. No, but they're finding meaning. They have accepted that their loved one has died. They're reconstructing their life. And what I wanted to tell you is what grief is like. I'm wearing this beautiful scarf here. And if anybody knows me, you know that I love scarves. And grief is like this. This is your loved one. They cloak you with love. You love it. You love showing them off. You know, when you open your wallet and you say, this is my child. And then one day suddenly you're walking by and a nail rips the scarf and you look at it in horror and you think, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You still love the scarf because it has meaning. Maybe your child or your husband or your mom gave you the scarf. You don't want to throw it away, but it has a hole. What do I do? You go through all those phases of grief and loss, and then it hits you suddenly. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull and smoothen out the fray. So you pull and you smooth out the fray, and it becomes smooth. From a distance, nobody knows that there was once a hole, but you know exactly the spot, you know the day that it has been ripped. And when you come closer, those in your intimate circle can see that it is frayed. It will never be the same, but you know what? It's usable. That's where you bring meaning. I can still wear it. I can still have cloak me. And this is where you realize that having everything means nothing until you have everything. And the everything is your soul. The everything is your family. The everything is feeling a sense of belonging. The everything is knowing that you're healthy. The everything is knowing that you have meaning in your life. And as you use that scarf and you find meaning, for some people, for others, you create a legacy. You use your memories of your loved one. You use the memories of going through this pandemic to bring meaning to yourself, bring meaning to your life, just like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers did. They brought meaning to the world. They continue the legacy of their loved ones. And that can simply be, I was talking to someone recently, and they were talking about their father. And I said to them, continue his legacy. What about that? He was an avid volunteer. Continue volunteering things that they love. That's a wonderful way to find meaning. And what it does, it tells your soul that all the trappings that I have, that where society says that this is success, real success is about finding meaning. So if, unfortunately, God willing, that some tragedy happens and you don't have a home, there's food scarcity, there can be some joy. Creating a sense of resilience through self-care is how this all comes together. Self-care is so important. We cannot go back. We can never go back to where things were. We can never go back to where things we thought was perfect, or where our loved one was, or where our business was flourishing, or where we can have those connections, where we didn't know about the pandemic, but we can go through it. Grief is not about getting over it. Grief is about getting through it. We get over a cold. We never get over when something has wounded our heart. Like I said, like the scarf, this hole has been pulled away. We do not see the fray from far away, but we can see it close up. It will never be the same, but it will have meaning. And how do you find that? The pulling of the scarf and making it smooth again is through self-care. I'm a radical believer in self-care. I prioritize my self-care like nothing I have ever done in my life because it's essential. And self-care is not always going to the spa. Self-care is caring for our soul, because sometimes we can use going to the spa, going out with friends and girlfriends, even though it can bring meaning, as self-soothing. Self-soothing and self-care are two different things. If you're doing something always when you feel a pain and you're using something for self-soothing, that's avoiding getting in, because the smoothing of the wound, the making the scarf smooth again, is the work that we do every day. How you do that depends on you. For me, it was really reconnecting with my yoga practice. It was journaling. It was just getting really deep within, but it was literally practicing self-care. It was going from working 40, 50 hours to working less. It was a big part of it was learning to say no and creating boundaries. It was truly doing the work that I wanted to do. And it was accepting that people in my life, I couldn't fix them. And that was one of the biggest lessons. So self-care is a practice. It's something that you do moment by moment. It's individual and it's specific to help you to create a sense of mindfulness. When we are mindful, when we name our struggles and name the issues that we're challenging with, and understanding that we don't have to have a deep addiction like we think of, like I've worked with people with addiction. Your struggles can be something simple. I'm struggling with just feeling sad about, as I talked about, ambiguous grief. My business is okay, but it's not flourishing. I'm struggling with that. Naming it is claiming it. When we name something, we can master it and we can have ownership of it. When we own something, it becomes ours. We shouldn't access, because if I go into your home and I don't have access to it and I don't own it, that's called breaking and entering. But if I own a home, it's mine. I can enter it anytime I want. It's the same thing with our issues. And the biggest challenge with knowing that we have a challenge or a struggle in our life is knowing what it is. We don't recognize it. How do we recognize it? Is by sitting and being with ourselves. This does not have to be 10 hours on top of a mountain. It can be 1 minute in the shower where you just place your hands on your heart. Our body is very intelligent. Our body sends us signs way before our mind realizes that something is off. And sitting with it, journaling with it, taking a walk, going for a swim, we don't have to solve it in that day. But if you sit in the shower, for example, this is where I love. I stand in the shower, I put a drop of essential oil on a washcloth, and I just stand there. And over time, I've learned that my body will tell myself, my mind, what it needs. So I ask you to do that. And when we name our struggles, we can claim our struggles. And when we claim something, we can own it, we can access it, decide what we want to change or not change, and then map it out. You create a roadmap through your challenge and tribulations. The other thing that it's important to know, that it's important to take time. This is not going to happen overnight. Connecting to your soul and having soul joy and joyful living to your life takes time. It's conscious. It's you saying, this is what I want. We shouldn't want to just rest in peace. We should want to live in peace. And living in peace is a lot more challenging than it sounds, because it's about saying boundaries. It's about saying, no, this is not peaceful for me. And sometimes when we start to do that, we are going to get pushback from people. But if this is truly peaceful, and actually placing your hands on your heart like this is so powerful. This is where healing begins, when we create boundaries, because you are the only person that you know what you need. And everybody needs this. It takes time. Healing takes time. It looks different for everyone. And the way that I go through something may be totally different for you. Maybe something that I take a couple of months, you might take a year. And one of the things I want to challenge you about, don't judge anyone. Do not think that, oh, they should get over it. That's the one thing. If you see somebody going through something, please don't say it. Please don't think about it. Healing is unique. We all need it. Grief is universal, but healing is individual. Take it one day at a time. Sounds easy, right? But aim for progression, not perfection. Maybe yesterday was a great day and today you feel like you slipped up. I've learned more in the slip ups, in the things that I've failed at, and in the things that I've succeeded, because it's when I fail at something, it has taught me, oh, I shouldn't go that way. It's like driving. If you get lost and you realize, oh, I should have made a left turn, back there instead of a right time, you go and you try it again and you do it correctly. So learn from it. Be so easy and gentle with yourself, because as I said, having everything is never enough. The everything is you. The everything is your soul happiness. The everything is joy. And why not take it one day at a time? That's all we're granted. We're granted today. When I wake up in the morning, I say blessings to the day. And I'm thankful for the day. In the Christian faith, we say the Our Father, give us this day our daily bread. It's never give us this week. It's never give us this year. It's give us this day. Because in that moment, in that day, we can be mindful. I'm a Reiki master, and one of the precepts is about that moment. It's about that day. It's about being present. As I said, self-care is not being selfish. It's taking care of you. When your joy cup is not filled, how can you possibly pour and help anybody else? You need to be happy for you. So when your joy cup is filled, you can pour out and help others. When you're happy, when your boundaries are being met, when your love language is being fulfilled, you are now caring for yourself. And this is vitally important, because when we care for ourselves, then we can care for others. We can then do the work and the business that we so love, because we know that we're doing it in love, and we're doing it because we want to, not because we have to. So, as I come down to wrap up this part of the presentation, I want to take an opportunity to practice bringing meaning through mindfulness. So this is an opportunity. I hope that you'll practice with me. It's a technique that I love to do. It's something that helps me and helps my clients to reduce anxiety, but it's also something that you can do if you're at a meeting. It's a wonderful way to be mindful. So I'm going to explain it, and then we can practice together. So the one thing you have to know is the ability to count backwards from 5, right? So how it works is that you're going to look at 5 things around the room that you're in. And each time you look at it, you take a breath. Then you are going to hear 4 things, smell 3 things, taste 2, and feel 1. So I'm going to go through it, and I'll talk myself through it and do it, and then we'll practice it together. And I'll tell you what I'm looking at, so this you can maybe do the same. So I'm taking a breath, and I'm looking at 5 things. Taking a breath, looking at my camera, looking at 1 computer edge, 2 computer edge, that's 3, the camera again 4, and the screen 5. I'm taking a breath, another 1, 2, and another 1, 3. I'm tasting, maybe you had some coffee or your chocolate, and you're just breathing. 1, 2, 3. And I went to the wrong order, but you're hearing 4, you're hearing 2 things, 1, 2, and you're touching 1. Basically what you're doing, you're going through all your senses, and each sense that you get to, you're counting from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And each time you count, you are doing the breath. So let's practice together. So take a moment, and I want you to look at 5 things, and I will do the count. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. We're going to hear 4 things. Might be your heartbeat, an air conditioner, or just the silence. 4, breathe. 3, 2, and 1. We're going to smell 3 things. And 3, and 2, and 1. We're going to taste 2 things. And 2, and 1. And we're going to touch 1. Maybe it's just your hands. And 1. And a nice breath, and back to center. This is it's a great way that I've found to bring mindfulness into our life. And what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being present in the moment. And a lot of times, what disconnects us from our soul, what disconnects us from our joy, what disconnects us from what's really important is that we're not mindful and appreciating our presence. But how do we do that? It's because we haven't practiced building our mindfulness muscle. How do we do it? It's by being mindful. And we hear all about this mindful meditation, and it sounds so complicated, but it's really about your breath, and it's about being present in the moment. You can do this by when you wash the dishes. And the act of counting backwards involves your brain. So it helps you to increase that connection because you have to focus on your breath. You have to be working with your brain to be counting backwards. So this can be something as you're washing the dishes, you're breathing, you're counting back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And each time you count, you're breathing. And you're breathing at your pace. It's best to breathe through your nose because that's how your body is made. Because when we breathe through our mouth, we're telling our body we're stressed. So breathe. Mindfulness is saying to you, I am mindful that I'm here. I'm mindful that this is important. This body is important. And what a way, as we are going in through the other phases, now that more and more people are getting vaccinated, we're talking about going back to things, getting our hair cut, and just reconnecting to people. Let's remember this lesson. Let's remember that what is important. So as when we do hit a difficult time, and it will happen, because life is, I had a teacher that said, life is like a crisis. We're either in one or we're coming through one. So as we're coming through this crisis, another mini or major crisis will happen. Let's remember the joy. Let's remember the lessons that we've learned here. Let's remember that life is important. Life is about being mindful. Life is about knowing and reconstructing and finding meaning. And knowing if you are experiencing any grief, you won't get over it. You'll get through it by bringing meaning, finding support. So remember, start with your mindfulness. It will help you to get to joy. Mindfulness is the key to realizing that having everything is never enough unless you have you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being here. And I'm here for ask if you have any questions.
Ophelia, I want to say one thing.
Okay.
I wish I knew you 10 years ago.
Oh. So. Well, you know me now.
Yeah. Very grateful. So
thank you.
Because you're right. You know, it takes time for everybody in different situations to not to get over it, but to go through it. And sometimes you think you've gone through it, and even 10 years later, you realize, no, there's a little remnant there still. So yeah. It's so nice to go through this with you, and there's healing in that. So thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Glad you made it through.
I can't see it, but Gabby, do you see any questions?
I have my hand raised.
Hi, Sherry.
My mute's off. We've had some technical difficulties through this presentation for some reason for some people, so our apologies, but that's out of our control. But Catherine, you had a question.
Yes, Ophelia, when someone close to you dies, when my dad died, I found that people were, interestingly, hesitant to express any condolences. And I realized through that process, because many people knew about it, that it's so important to do so. But you mentioned very clearly, and I thank you for it, not to say, I know what, you know, you're going to get over it, and I know what you're going through, and well, they were old and they lived a long life. So what are your suggestions on some of the things we could be saying when we come up against someone, not against, but we find out about someone who has lost a loved one?
So I find that the first thing is, for one thing, as a griever, if you are grieving someone, the world does not understand grief literacy like how I do. So they don't know what to say because we don't learn this in school. So sometimes people say nothing, or they say the trivial things. And I remember, for me, everybody said about my mom, oh, she had 70 years, she had it all, you know, that was enough, that's what God granted her. And I remember at one time I wanted to just punch somebody in the face.
Right.
Because I was learning too that I thought that that was right. I thought that in a year I would get over it and that I would feel the same. So what I would encourage people to, if you don't know what to say, don't do anything. But I would encourage you to what not to say. Don't say, I'm going to get over it. Don't say, I understand. It's even if it's the same, if your father died at 90, you don't know what they're experiencing. But what you can say is being honest. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here for you. And I think just being with their grief cannot be fixed. It needs to be witnessed. And the hard thing I find is that as somebody who is a supporter, a lot of times helping somebody going through a grief triggers your own grief, right? I have a hard time working with women in the earlier part, or when I had friends whose mother died, especially if they were close to my mom. It just brought it all back. How I went to funerals years ago, it's so challenging for me to go to a funeral right now, right? There's a lot of practice. But what I would say is, if you're trying to help somebody going through a grief, be very patient with them. And a lot of times it's just sitting, because they don't even know what they need, because it's the first time now I understand why we get one parent, sets of parents, because I don't want to go through this like 10 times. Like, once for a mother is fine. Thank God my dad's alive. I know, you know, the circle of life I was going through, but I cannot go through it. Like, you know, if you got another pair, 1, 2 died and you were replaced, I couldn't go through it. My one thing in ending this is just be kind. And if you truly don't know what to say, just say that. Because I know as a griever, those were the people that says, I have no idea what you're going through, but I'm here for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great advice. Yeah. I think many of us suffered loss over the last 16 months in so many ways. So this has been a great way for all of us to hear from you, Ophelia. And I so agree with you. Sometimes what I learned is just being quiet, getting away from all your distractions and get out of your office, off that internet and off your phone, and just be quiet and be present and be intentional and be aware of what's really happening in your mind. And as you say, mindfulness. And I think that is really important. And as you say in the morning, I'm grateful for another day. And how am I going to embrace and serve? And I have to admit, what you said about joy to me is very precious. It's a gift, and that has been shifted over the last 16 months in particular. So how do you protect that? And that again goes back down to mindfulness and how you live your each day in gratitude and being able to process properly. So we're very thankful to you, Ophelia, that we're so happy that you're in Kingston here and and that you were able to join us today. And I know we spoke very briefly when we were doing before the presentation a week ago. We talked about the real talk. Remember the real talk?
All right.
I just want you to talk a little bit about that and share that quickly with the group so they're aware.
So one of the things that came out from going through the pandemic is that I have officially registered my business called Rigault with Ophelia, which stands for resiliency, equity, authenticity, and leadership. So basically, those are the conversations that I speak about. Having resiliency, without it, we cannot go through life. And having equity in everything. I'm a big believer in equity, and equity is part of diversity, looking at the systemic barriers for people with wellness and even getting grief support, and having authenticity. And we need leaders to lead those ways, and leaders doesn't mean you own a business and you're a CEO. You can be a community leader, you can be a volunteer, you can be the leader of your family. So those are the topics that I have. So today it was great having Real Talk. And as I told Gabby, the name came to me. I'm Caribbean, I was born in Trinidad, and I remember my mother would always have Real Talk with her. I would always have Real Talk, and children weren't allowed when she had those Real Talk with her family. And but of course, as an only child growing up, I was always around, and I heard those Real Talk conversations. And it was really great because when those women got together, how they spoke, their language, their words was so different than, oh, we're in church on Sunday morning. It was like, oh, this is different, right? As kids, we observe a lot, right? And of course. Yeah. But that's what the legacy of this was. I really wanted to have real conversations with people. And I find, and as Gabby and I is talking, I'm less tolerant of not having those real conversations, because I feel that this pandemic, the lessons that it showed me, especially in Brown and Indigenous bodies and vulnerable people with mental health, their life was challenging before, but there was even more so. And we need to have those real conversations. And if we all are in any form and feel that we're privileged, it's important to talk about those things. It's important to have those conversations with anybody that we have in any form that you're doing, because whatever you're doing is valuable. I know the work of many of you, and it's valuable. So have those real conversations, as my mom would say. Be real with people.
Thank you, Ophelia.
Thank you.
It's been great. And I just wanted to do a couple of quick announcements, if I may. First of all, this is our last of the series of the first 6 months, and we will be returning in September. And by mid-August, you'll see this on our newsletter as we continue our journey through 2021. And for those who are new and first time here, do make sure to subscribe to our website at www.womenmeanbusiness.ca, and you'll receive our Connect and Flourish e-newsletter as well, to keep you informed of many resources that we provide, and also future events and virtual presentations. And also, if you haven't had a chance, and I'm going to throw a little bit of humor in there. So Ophelia, if you love scarves so much, you need to check out our
I already have.
Store, Women on the Move Canada.
I did. I was looking at the bags. I'm like, oh my God. I'm packing up some stuff, and I'm working with somebody about decluttering. I'm like, so I told her, my scarves are off limits. Yeah. I'm sorry. My scarves are off limits. I have a lot of scarves, and I'm thinking, wow, I do. I have like 4 drawers full of scarves.
Well, we're in the process of hopefully adding another artist as well as we're moving forward. So we're quite excited about it. And Catherine, you've been so supportive with our face masks. Thank you so much, Catherine, for your support on that as well. So we appreciate it. So please visit the store. We have a new look. We had a great team from Digital Main Street revisit our store, and we have a brand new look. And so we're going to see, we'll continue that journey with them. And let me see if there's not one. Oh, I wanted to share something. I wanted to leave you with this. There was a young lady on America's Got Talent who's 30 years old, who has cancer in a big way, sang her song, and of course, and the song that she wrote called It's Okay. And at the end of the song, I mean, I had to get my Kleenex out for that. But what she says at the end says, you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. It brought the house down. And she got that, that big buzzer where everything came with her song. It was a beautiful song that she wrote. And this girl had very bad cancer, and her journey, 30-year-old, and it was just heartbreaking. But her mind state to go up and create the song and sing there and just share was outstanding. And the authenticity is about everything. And what I'm encouraging everyone to do as we embrace and move through this time in our lives is to spread hope, spread kindness, spread patience, be kind, spread some happiness. We all need it. And I know so many in our group that bring us a lot of inspiration as well and support, and we thank that. So we will see you in the fall, or hopefully sometime during the summer on a patio somewhere, because we're planning, Josie and I, to do that. And Josie, do you have any last words as well that you'd like to share?
No, I just want to thank Ophelia again and everybody else that came here today. And just to let everybody know, especially those that did have technical difficulties, this is recorded and it will be, Ophelia's video presentation will be in our next newsletter, but it'll also be on our YouTube channel. You can access it at any time. And I know I will.
Yeah.
So,
thank you.
Bye,
Have a wonderful
everyone.
summer, everyone.
Great
Enjoy.
summer. Bye. Be safe.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
bye. Take care.